Hello, and welcome to the Sleep Library. Wherever you are resting tonight, you have found a quiet place. For this evening, we are drifting through 100 relaxing facts about Stoicism, a philosophy of steadiness, attention, and calm in the middle of an uncertain world. There are no adverts in the middle, no sudden sounds, and nothing you need to remember. The ideas arrive slowly, one by one, like soft footsteps in a quiet hallway. If you fall asleep before the end, that is perfectly all right. You can simply listen for as long as you like. And now, we will begin with the first quiet fact. Fact 1. Stoicism began not as cold emotional control, but as a practice of steadiness in an unstable world. When people hear the word Stoic today, they sometimes imagine a person with no feelings at all, standing stiffly against pain or disappointment. But the original Stoics were not trying to become stone. They were trying to understand how a human being could remain clear when life changed, without asking permission. In the ancient world, illness, exile, war, debt, and public shame were never far away. Fortune could turn suddenly. A family could lose money, a city could lose power, a reputation could disappear in a single season. Stoicism began with this ordinary human problem. How do we stay inwardly balanced when the outer world keeps moving? The answer was not numbness, it was training. Fact 2. The name Stoicism came from the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch in Athens where early Stoics taught. The word Stoicism comes from a real place, the Stoa Poikile or painted porch in Athens. It was not a hidden temple or a private academy behind closed doors. It was a public colonnade, decorated with paintings, where people passed by in the rhythm of the city. You can imagine the sound of sandals on stone, voices in the marketplace, sunlight moving across the columns. Philosophy there was not separate from life. It happened near commerce, politics, gossip, and ordinary errands. This matters because Stoicism was never meant only for scholars. It was spoken where people actually lived. From the beginning, it belonged to the public day, and later, to many private nights. Fact 3. Zeno of Citium founded Stoicism after losing his cargo in a shipwreck and turning toward philosophy. The founder of Stoicism was Zeno of Citium, a merchant from Cyprus. According to later tradition, Zeno lost his cargo in a shipwreck and eventually came to Athens, where he discovered philosophy. The story may have been polished over time, but it carries a quiet meaning. A man loses what he was carrying across the sea, and in that loss, he begins looking for something less easily taken away. There is something very Stoic in that image. Broken cargo, wet ropes, the end of one plan, and the beginning of another kind of life. Zeno did not teach that losses were pleasant. He taught that loss did not have to be the end of the self. Sometimes a ruined voyage opens a different road. Fact 4. Early Stoicism grew in public spaces, making it a philosophy for ordinary civic life, not just private study. The first Stoics taught in places where anyone might listen. This gave the school a different feeling from a philosophy that stayed only in quiet rooms with careful students. A person could hear Stoic ideas while walking through Athens, perhaps on the way to settle a dispute, buy food, meet a friend, or avoid someone unpleasant. The setting mattered. Stoicism was shaped by the everyday pressures of city life. It asked how to speak honestly, how to bear insult, how to act justly, how to face uncertainty, and how to live among other people, without being ruled by every mood around you. It was not escape. It was practice in the open air. Calm mind, the Stoics thought, had to be tested among real voices. Fact 5. Stoicism was shaped by earlier Greek thinkers, especially Socrates, the Cynics, and Heraclitus. Stoicism did not appear from nowhere. Like most philosophies, it grew out of older conversations. Socrates gave the Stoics a model of moral courage, a person who cared more about the state of his soul than about public approval. The Cynics showed them a rougher kind of independence, a willingness to live simply and question social vanity. Heraclitus gave them the image of a world ordered by change, fire, and reason. The Stoics gathered these influences and made something more systematic. One reason Stoicism feels strong is that it begins with a humble admission. People are often confused about what is truly good. We chase praise. We fear loss. We cling to things that cannot stay. Stoicism asks us to look again slowly. Fact 6. The early Stoics divided philosophy into logic, physics, and ethics, seeing them as parts of one whole life. To the early Stoics, philosophy had three main parts: logic, physics, and ethics. These may sound like separate subjects, but for them, they belonged together. Logic helped a person think clearly and avoid being carried away by false impressions. Physics meant understanding nature, the universe, and the larger order of things. Ethics asked how a human being should live. Their image compared these parts to a living creature. Logic as the bones and sinews, physics as the soul, and ethics as the flesh. Other images used an egg, a garden, or a field. The point was simple enough. You cannot live well if you cannot see clearly. And you cannot see clearly if you never ask what kind of world you are living in. Fact 7. Stoicism spread from Greece into Rome because its ideas suited a world of duty, politics, uncertainty, and loss. As Stoicism moved from the Greek world into Rome, it found new listeners. Roman life placed great value on duty, public service, family honor, law, and endurance. These concerns matched many Stoic themes. A Roman senator, soldier, lawyer, or household leader might find Stoicism useful not because life was peaceful, but because it was demanding. Power could be dangerous. Reputation could shift. Public life could require restraint when anger felt easier. In a Roman house at dusk, one can imagine a person setting aside the noise of the day and asking, "Did I act with justice? Did I let fear rule me? Did I mistake praise for goodness?" Stoicism gave such questions a shape. It helped people examine the day without being swallowed by it. Fact 8. The Roman Stoics made the philosophy more personal, practical, and intimate. The earliest Stoics built a large and detailed system, but the Roman Stoics are often the ones modern readers meet first. Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius wrote or taught in a way that feels close to daily life. Seneca wrote letters about time, anger, grief, wealth, friendship, and death. Epictetus spoke sharply about freedom, desire, and what truly belongs to us. Marcus Aurelius wrote private notes to himself, often in the middle of heavy responsibility. With them, Stoicism becomes less like a school building and more like a lamp beside the bed. The ideas are still serious, but they are spoken near ordinary human troubles. How to wake up, how to bear pain, how to answer insult, how to leave the day gently. Fact 9. Stoicism survived partly because its writings felt useful during fear, exile, illness, and political danger. Many ancient philosophical writings were lost, and much of early Stoicism disappeared. Yet Stoicism survived through fragments, letters, notes, lectures, and remembered teachings because people kept finding it useful. It was a philosophy for difficult conditions. Seneca lived near the violent politics of emperors. Epictetus had known slavery. Marcus Aurelius ruled during war and plague. These were not writers standing far away from trouble. Their words endured because they did not pretend that life was easy. A person reading Stoicism during illness, grief, or uncertainty could feel that the writer understood pressure from the inside. Not every Stoic answer is simple. Not every Stoic claim is easy to accept. But the tradition survived because it offered a place to stand when the ground felt unsteady. Fact 10. At its heart, Stoicism asked one quiet question: how can a person live well when fortune cannot be controlled? This may be the central question of Stoicism. Not how can we control everything, because we cannot. Not how can we avoid every loss, insult, delay, illness, or disappointment, because life does not offer that bargain. The Stoic question is quieter and more durable. How can we live well anyway? Fortune may give health, then take it. It may bring praise, then silence. It may open a door, then close another one without explanation. The Stoics did not think wisdom meant arranging life perfectly. They thought wisdom meant learning where to place the soul. What belongs to us? What does not? What kind of person are we becoming while events unfold? Those questions are old. Tonight, they can be set down softly. Fact 11. The Stoics believed the only true good is virtue, meaning the quality of the soul rather than outside success. For the Stoics, the word virtue did not mean looking perfect, sounding noble, or being admired by other people. It meant the condition of a person's character, whether the mind was honest, fair, brave, and guided by wisdom. This was a difficult idea, because most people naturally treat health, money, praise, and comfort as the main goods in life. The Stoics did not say those things were useless. They simply said they were unstable. They could arrive, leave, improve, or disappear without making the soul itself better or worse. Quieter terms, Stoicism asks where we place our deepest trust, not in applause, not in luck, not in the weather of other people's opinions, in the kind of person we are slowly becoming. Fact 12. For Stoics, virtue was usually divided into wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These four qualities became known as the cardinal virtues, and they helped make Stoic ethics easier to hold in the mind. Wisdom meant seeing clearly and choosing well. Courage meant doing what was right even when fear was present. Justice meant treating others fairly, not as tools for our own comfort. Temperance meant self-command, the ability to enjoy, refuse, wait and stop. You can imagine a person at the end of the day, sitting quietly by a small lamp, looking back over a conversation, a mistake, a temptation, or a moment of anger. The Stoic question would not be, did everyone praise me? It would be, was I wise, brave, fair, and measured? That is a calmer question. It can be answered without noise. Fact 13. The Stoic idea of control separates what belongs to us from what does not. This is one of the most famous Stoic ideas, especially through Epictetus. Some things are up to us, such as our judgments, choices, intentions, and the way we respond. Other things are not fully up to us, such as our bodies, reputation, wealth, social status, and the actions of other people. First, this sounds simple, but in daily life, people suffer because the two categories become tangled. We try to control what others think. We try to force outcomes. We rehearse conversations that have already ended. Stoicism gently cuts the knot. It does not make life easy, and it does not remove pain, but it gives the mind a place to return. This is mine to guide. That is not mine to command. Fact 14. Indifference in Stoicism did not mean things were meaningless, only that they were not the highest good. This word can be confusing. When the Stoics called things like health, money, status, and comfort indifferent, they did not mean that nobody should care about them. A sick body matters. A safe home matters. A friend matters. Food, shelter, and rest matter. The point was more precise. These things are not the final measure of a good life, because a person can have them and still be cruel, foolish, or restless. A person can also lose some of them and still act with dignity. In a quiet marketplace, two people might buy the same bread, wear the same cloak, and hear the same news. What differs is not only what happens to them, it is what they do with it inside. Fact 15. Preferred indifference, such as health and friendship, could be chosen carefully without being worshipped. The Stoics made room for common sense. They knew that health is usually preferable to sickness, enough money is preferable to hunger, and friendship is preferable to loneliness. These were called preferred indifference. They are worth choosing when we can, but not worth surrendering the soul for. This is a gentle but important distinction. Stoicism does not ask a person to reject comfort simply because comfort is temporary. It asks us not to become owned by it. A warm room may be enjoyed. A good meal may be received with gratitude. A friend's kindness may be treasured. But none of these should become a chain around the mind. The Stoic tries to hold good things with open hands, grateful while they are here, steadier when they change. Fact 16. The Stoic word apatheia meant freedom from destructive passions, not the absence of all feeling. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of Stoicism. The Greek word apatheia can sound like apathy, but it did not mean being dull, empty, or uncaring. It meant not being ruled by passions that distort judgment, such as uncontrolled rage, panic, envy, or greed. The Stoics made a difference between unhealthy passions and healthier feelings. They allowed room for goodwill, joy, caution, affection, and a kind of clear-minded concern. Imagine someone receiving painful news. Stoicism would not require a blank face or a frozen heart. It would ask whether grief must become despair, whether fear must become confusion, whether anger must become cruelty. A feeling may enter the room. It does not have to take the whole house. Fact 17. Stoic calm came from examining impressions before believing them. An impression is the first appearance of something to the mind. Someone speaks sharply, and the impression says, "I have been insulted." Plan fails, and the impression says, "Everything is ruined." A stranger looks away, and the impression says, "I am disliked." The Stoics noticed how quickly the mind gives meaning to events. Their practice was to pause before agreeing. Epictetus compared this to testing a message before accepting it as true. In daily life, this pause can be very small, almost invisible. A breath before answering, a moment before believing the worst, a softer look at the facts. Stoic calm does not come from having no impressions. It comes from not letting every impression become a master. The mind can learn to wait. Fact 18. Living according to nature meant living according to reason, human connection, and the order of reality. The Stoic phrase, living according to nature, can sound vague at first, as if it only meant walking through trees or admiring the stars. But for the Stoics, nature included the structure of reality and the nature of human beings. Human being is capable of reason, speech, moral choice and relationship. To live according to nature, then, is to live in a way that respects those capacities. It means not pretending we are isolated creatures, made only for appetite and fear. It also means accepting that we live inside a world larger than our preferences. The rain may fall, the body may age, other people may disappoint us. Still, reason can answer gently. Connection can remain possible. Reality does not have to be our enemy. Fact 19. The Stoics saw human beings as social creatures, made for cooperation rather than isolation. Stoicism is sometimes imagined as a lonely philosophy, as if the wise person simply withdraws from everyone and needs nothing. But the Stoics repeatedly taught that human beings belong with one another. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about being made for cooperation, like feet, hands, eyelids, or rows of teeth. The image is simple and bodily. Parts of one creature are meant to work together, not fight without end. This does not mean every relationship is easy. Some people are unfair, impatient, vain, or careless. The Stoic answer is not to hate humanity, but to remember what humans are: confused, vulnerable, the social beings trying to live with other confused, vulnerable, social beings. Justice begins there. So does patience. So sometimes does rest. Fact 20. Stoic practice was not about escaping life, but meeting life with a clearer mind. By now, the central shape of Stoicism begins to appear. It is not a philosophy of running away from the world. It is not a command to become hard, silent, or untouched. It is a way of meeting the same world with fewer illusions. The delay is still a delay. The illness is still an illness. The rude word is still unpleasant. The loss still hurts. But the Stoic asks what can be done with the next moment, the next judgment, the next small act of character. In this way, Stoicism becomes less like armor and more like a steadying hand placed lightly on the shoulder. Life continues. The mind listens. The day does not need to be perfect before we begin again. Fact 21. Socrates became a model for the Stoics because he stayed steady even when condemned to death. The Stoics looked back to Socrates as one of the clearest examples of philosophy lived under pressure. He did not write Stoic books, and he lived before the Stoic school began, but his manner of life shaped their imagination. In Athens, after being sentenced to death, Socrates did not beg for escape at any cost or treat survival as the highest good. He asked what justice required. He asked what kind of person he would be if fear became his master. To the Stoics, this mattered deeply. A person's real test was not what they said in comfort, but what they remained faithful to when comfort disappeared. Socrates showed that the soul could stay awake even as the body approached its final sleep. Fact 22. Zeno's shipwreck became a quiet symbol of losing one kind of wealth and finding another. The story of Zeno's shipwreck is often told because it feels almost like a parable. A merchant loses his cargo, reaches Athens, and eventually discovers philosophy. Whether every detail happened exactly that way is less important than the meaning ancient readers found in it. The sea takes away goods that could be counted, sold, and stored. In their place, Zeno begins searching for something less dependent on wind and water. You can imagine him not as a heroic figure, but as a tired traveler, carrying disappointment through a noisy city. Stoicism begins well with such an image, not with victory, not with perfect calm, but with a person who has lost something and slowly learns to ask, what cannot be lost in the same way? Fact 23. Cleanthes, the second head of the Stoic school, was remembered for endurance and humble labor. Cleanthes followed Zeno as the leader of the Stoic school, and ancient stories often present him as a man of great patience. He was said to have supported himself by carrying water at night, doing physical labor while studying philosophy by day. The image is simple. A man under the dark sky, drawing water, earning enough to keep learning. Whether polished by memory or not, the story suited the Stoic ideal. Philosophy was not only clever speech. It was endurance, discipline, and a willingness to live without glamour. Cleanthes also wrote a famous hymn to Zeus, showing the Stoic sense of a rational order moving through the world. In him, thought and labor seemed to walk together, quietly, without complaint. Fact 24. Chrysippus helped build Stoicism into a detailed philosophical system. If Zeno began the school, Chrysippus gave it much of its structure. Later, ancient writers treated him as one of Stoicism's great architects. He wrote extensively on logic, ethics, language, fate, emotion, and nature, though most of his works are now lost. This loss can feel strange. Thinker who helped shape centuries of philosophy reaches us mostly through fragments and reports from others. Still, his importance remains clear. Chrysippus tried to make Stoicism not merely a set of calming sayings, but a serious account of reality and human life. He wanted the ideas to hold together. Behind the soft sentences people remember today, there was once a vast workshop of arguments. The quiet surface of Stoicism had deep foundations underneath. Fact 25. Cato the Younger became a Roman symbol of Stoic integrity in political crisis. Cato the Younger was not a philosopher in the same way as Zeno or Chrysippus, but he became one of Rome's most famous examples of Stoic character. He lived during the violent collapse of the Roman Republic, when ambition, civil war, and personal loyalty pulled public life apart. Cato was remembered for his severity, independence, and refusal to bend his principles for convenience. Later admirers saw him as a man who chose integrity over safety. This does not mean every judgment he made was gentle or simple. Stoic examples are rarely without difficulty. But Cato's life showed why Stoicism appealed to people in political danger. When the world becomes loud with pressure, there is a special kind of power in refusing to sell the inner self. Fact 26. Seneca wrote many of his moral letters while living close to wealth, danger, and imperial power. Seneca is one of the most readable Roman Stoics, because he writes so often about ordinary weakness. He knew anger, ambition, luxury, fear, and the nearness of death. He was also deeply entangled in Roman power, serving near Emperor Nero, which made his life morally complicated. This is part of what makes Seneca interesting at night. He is not a saint speaking from a clean distance. He is a man writing about simplicity while knowing wealth, about calm while standing near danger, about virtue while living in a world of compromise. His letters often feel like one person trying to steady another, and perhaps himself as well. In the candlelight of his sentences, Stoicism becomes intimate, imperfect, and human. Fact 27. Epictetus began life enslaved, which shaped his sharp understanding of inner freedom. Epictetus was born into slavery, and this fact gives special weight to his teaching about what is truly within our power. He knew, in a direct and bodily way, that many external conditions could be controlled by others. A person could command his schedule, his labor, even his movement. Yet Epictetus taught that the deepest form of freedom concerned judgment, desire, aversion, and moral choice. This does not make slavery acceptable, and it does not erase suffering. It shows how carefully Epictetus distinguished outer constraint from inner consent. His voice can sound stern because he wanted students to stop handing their peace to every circumstance. In his teaching room, philosophy was not decoration. It was a hard, clear tool for preserving the self. Fact 28. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections while carrying the burdens of empire and war. Marcus Aurelius was Roman emperor, but the book now called Meditations was not written as a public performance. It was a series of private notes, many likely written during military campaigns, illness, grief, and administrative strain. That is why the book often feels so close. Marcus is not announcing that he has mastered life. He is reminding himself, be patient. Remember death. Do not be dragged by anger. Do the work in front of you. Times, you can almost picture a campaign tent, a dim lamp, cold air outside, and a tired ruler writing a few lines before sleep. The power of the book comes from this privacy. Even an emperor had to practice returning to his own mind. Fact 29. Stoic. Stories often show people practicing philosophy under pressure, not in peaceful conditions. The most enduring Stoic figures are rarely shown in perfect calm surroundings. Socrates faces death. Zeno loses his cargo. Cleanthes works through poverty. Cato stands amid political collapse. Seneca writes near danger. Epictetus teaches after enslavement. Marcus reflects during war and illness. This pattern matters. Stoicism was not built around the fantasy of a trouble-free life. It was built for the moment when life becomes difficult, and the mind needs a way to remain honest. A quiet room can help us study Stoicism, but the philosophy itself was meant for crowded streets, courtrooms, sickbeds, arguments, and farewells. It asks not whether we can avoid pressure forever. It asks what may remain clear when pressure has already arrived. Fact 30. The most memorable Stoic examples are not dramatic victories, but moments of quiet self-command. Stoicism is sometimes described in strong, heroic language, but many of its deepest moments are small. A person does not answer insult with insult. A frightened mind pauses before imagining disaster. Someone with power chooses restraint. Someone in grief allows sorrow without letting it become hatred. Someone at the end of the day admits a fault and begins again. These are not victories that fill a public square with applause. They may not be noticed at all. And yet, to the Stoics, such moments mattered greatly. Character is formed there, in the nearly invisible space between impulse and action. The world may see very little, but the soul knows, and sometimes that is enough for the night. Fact 31. Stoicism is often mistaken for emotional numbness, but it actually teaches emotional training. Common picture of a Stoic person is someone who does not cry, does not tremble, does not soften, and does not seem touched by anything. But this is a thin picture of a much richer philosophy. The Stoics were not trying to erase the heart. They were trying to understand how the heart becomes disturbed, confused, or carried away. A person may feel fear before a difficult conversation, sadness after a loss, or irritation when plans are interrupted. Stoicism does not say these first movements make us weak. It asks what happens next. Do we feed the feeling with false judgments? Do we let it command the tongue, the hands, the whole day? Emotional training begins in that small pause where feeling is noticed but not blindly obeyed. Fact 32. Stoicism does not ask people to stop caring. It asks them to care wisely. This misunderstanding matters because a life without care would not be a Stoic life at all. The Stoics cared deeply about justice, friendship, duty, truth, courage, and the common good. They simply warned against attaching our peace to things that can never fully belong to us. A parent may care for a child without controlling every future event. A friend may offer loyalty without owning another person's choices. A citizen may work for justice without being able to guarantee the result. In each case, care remains but clinging softens. The Stoic does not love less. One way to say it is that Stoicism tries to make love cleaner. Less possessive, less panicked, less ruled by fear, and more able to stand beside what is real. Fact 33. Stoic acceptance is not passive surrender, but a way to stop fighting reality before acting well. Acceptance can sound like doing nothing. But for the Stoics, accepting what has happened is not the same as approving of it, enjoying it, or refusing to respond. It means the mind stops wasting its strength on the impossible wish that the present moment were already different. Imagine a letter arriving with bad news, a cup breaking in the kitchen, or a plan dissolving because of weather. The first task is to see clearly. This has happened. Only then can action become clean. Repair what can be repaired. Apologize where apology is needed. Rest where the body is tired. Speak where justice asks for speech. Stoic acceptance is not the end of action. It is the ground under wise action. Fact 34. Stoicism is not pessimistic, even though it often thinks about death, loss, and hardship. The Stoics spoke often about death, not because they loved darkness, but because they did not want the mind to be shocked by the ordinary shape of life. Everything living is changing. Every possession is temporary. Every meeting happens inside time. To remember this can sound heavy at first, yet the purpose was not despair. It was tenderness and proportion. If a cup may break, we handle it with care, but not worship. If a friend is mortal, we listen more fully when they speak. If our own time is limited, we become less willing to spend it entirely on resentment. Stoic reflection on death can make the present day more visible. The shadow does not remove the light. It helps us notice where the light falls. Fact 35. The Stoic phrase, "Control what you can," is useful, but much simpler than the full philosophy. Modern summaries often reduce Stoicism to a single lesson. Control what you can, let go of what you cannot. There is real value in that phrase, especially when the mind is tangled in worry. But Stoicism was more than a method for feeling better. It was a complete way of thinking about character, nature, reason, duty, and human community. The point was not merely to become calm. Cruel person can be calm. Selfish person can be calm. The Stoics wanted calm joined to virtue. They wanted a person to ask not only, "What can I control?" but also, "What is right? What is fair? What kind of human being am I becoming?" The deeper philosophy is quieter, but also more demanding. Fact 36. Stoicism was not designed as a productivity hack, but as a lifelong moral discipline. In recent times, Stoicism is sometimes used to help people work harder, wake earlier, ignore discomfort, or achieve success. Some of that may be useful in a limited way. But the ancient Stoics were not mainly interested in making a person more efficient. They were interested in making a person more free, more honest, more just, and less enslaved by appetite, praise, anger, or fear. Stoic morning was not only a time to plan tasks. It was a time to prepare the soul. A Stoic evening was not only a review of performance. It was a review of conscience. The measure was not how much had been accomplished. The measure was whether the day had been lived with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Fact 37. The Stoics did not deny pain. They questioned whether pain had to destroy the self. Pain was real to the Stoics. Illness was real. Grief was real. Hunger, fatigue, humiliation, and fear were real. What they questioned was the extra judgment that pain makes life meaningless, that suffering makes virtue impossible, or that discomfort gives us permission to abandon ourselves. This is a hard teaching, and it should be handled gently. A person in pain does not need a lecture. But Stoicism offers one steady thought. Even here, if there is room for one honest breath, one patient word, one refusal to become cruel, then the self has not been completely conquered. The body may ache. The heart may be tired. The situation may be unfair. And still, somewhere within the difficulty, a small lamp of choice may remain. Fact 38. Stoic courage includes softness, patience, and restraint, not only heroic toughness. Courage is often imagined as something loud, a battlefield, a raised voice, a dramatic refusal to yield. Stoicism knew those forms, but it also valued quieter courage, the courage to listen when pride wants to interrupt, courage to rest when the body has been treated like a machine, courage to apologize without decorating the apology, the courage to be misunderstood without immediately chasing every opinion. In a small room after an argument, courage may look like silence before a gentler sentence. On a difficult morning, it may look like doing the next necessary thing without hatred in the heart. Stoic courage is not always hard. Sometimes it is soft enough not to break what it is trying to protect. Fact 39. Stoicism can be misunderstood when separated from justice and responsibility toward others. Person can misuse Stoic language to avoid caring about injustice, loneliness, or the suffering of other people. They might say, "It is outside my control," and turn away too quickly. But ancient Stoicism did not teach a life of sealed-off self-protection. Human beings, the Stoics believed, are made for relationship and cooperation. Justice is one of the central virtues, not a decoration added later. This means Stoicism asks two things at once. First, do not let events destroy your judgment. Second, use your judgment in service of what is right. In a city street, in a family, in a workplace, or beside a tired friend, the Stoic task is not merely to remain undisturbed. It is to remain useful, fair, and humane. Fact 40. The calm of Stoicism is not coldness, but a steadier form of warmth. By correcting these misunderstandings, Stoicism begins to feel different. Less like a wall, and more like a hearth that does not flare wildly with every wind. Its calm is not meant to keep others away. It is meant to make kindness more reliable. A person ruled by every mood may love sincerely but unevenly. They may offer warmth one moment and anger the next. Stoic practice tries to make the inner weather less violent so that goodness can stay available. This does not make a person perfect. The Stoics themselves were still human, still practicing, still beginning again. But the direction matters. To be calm is not to be empty. It may mean becoming gentle enough to meet the world without being constantly broken by it. Fact 41. Stoics practiced beginning the day by preparing the mind for difficulty. A Stoic morning was not only a time to open the eyes and begin tasks. It was also a time to remember what the day might contain. Marcus Aurelius famously reminded himself that he would meet people who were meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, or unfriendly. This was not meant to make him bitter before sunrise. It was meant to make him less surprised. When the mind expects every person to be easy, every delay and sharp word feels like an invasion. That when the mind gently remembers that human beings are often tired, confused, and afraid, the day becomes less shocking. The Stoic prepares not to withdraw love from the world, but to keep enough steadiness to offer it wisely. Fact 42. Evening reflection helped Stoics examine actions without cruelty toward themselves. At the end of the day, some Stoics practiced looking back over what had happened. Seneca described questioning himself before sleep. What fault had he healed? What weakness had he resisted? What part of himself had improved? This kind of review was not meant to become self-punishment. It was more like tidying a room before night. Careless word could be noticed. The moment of patience could be remembered. A fear that had ruled the morning could be seen more clearly by evening. The point was not to become perfect by force, but to become more awake over time. In the quiet after lamps are lowered and voices fade, the mind can look at the day and say, softly, here is what I learned. Fact 43. Stoic journaling was a way to train attention, not simply record events. When Marcus Aurelius wrote what we now call meditations, he was not keeping a diary in the modern sense. He was not mainly preserving memories for readers in the future. He was training his own attention. Again and again, he returned to the same themes. Be patient, accept nature, remember death, do not be vain, do the work of a human being. This repetition can feel comforting, because real practice often repeats. A person does not become calm by hearing one beautiful sentence one time. The mind wanders, forgets, reacts, and returns. Stoic writing gives that return a shape. A notebook, a wax tablet, or a private page becomes a small place where the soul rehearses how it wants to live. Fact 44. Negative visualization helped people appreciate what they had without clinging too tightly. One Stoic practice was to imagine, gently and briefly, that something valued might be lost. Cup may break. Journey may be delayed. A friendship may change. The body may not always be strong. First, this sounds sad, but its purpose was gratitude rather than gloom. Can we remember that ordinary things are not guaranteed? They become more visible. A cup in the hand, the familiar room, the sound of someone breathing nearby, the simple ability to rest at night, all of it becomes less automatic. The Stoic does not imagine loss in order to suffer early. The Stoic imagines impermanence, so the present can be received more tenderly, with less demand and more care. Fact 45. Stoics practiced pausing before reacting to insults, delays, fear, or disappointment. Much of daily life turns on a small space between what happens and what we do next. Someone speaks rudely. The message does not arrive. A plan takes longer than expected. The first movement of the mind may be irritation, worry, or hurt. The Stoic practice is not to pretend that first movement never appeared. It's to pause before building a whole story around it. Perhaps the rude person is tired. Perhaps the delay is not a disaster. Perhaps fear is describing one possibility, not the whole truth. In that pause, freedom becomes practical, not grand, not dramatic, just practical. The breath slows, the shoulders lower. The answer can be chosen rather than thrown. Day can be changed by such a small gate. Fact 46. The dinner table, the marketplace, and the family home were all places to practice philosophy. Stoicism did not require a mountain cave or a life far away from ordinary duties. It could be practiced while buying bread, sharing a meal, listening to a child, caring for an aging parent, or walking through a crowded street. This is one reason the philosophy lasted. It knew that most people do not live in perfect silence. They live among requests, bills, memories, appetites, and interruptions. A dinner table may test temperance. A marketplace may test honesty. A family home may test patience more deeply than a lecture hall ever could. For the Stoic, philosophy becomes real when it enters these places. The question is not whether life is quiet enough to practice. The question is whether we can bring practice into the noise. Fact 47. Stoicism taught that small irritations reveal the state of the mind. Broken cup, a slow line, a misplaced key, a cold meal, a person speaking too loudly. These things may seem too small for philosophy, but the Stoics noticed that small events often uncover large attachments. We discover how much we wanted the day to obey us. We discover how quickly comfort turns into entitlement. We discover how easily a tiny inconvenience can borrow the voice of tragedy. This does not mean we should shame ourselves for irritation. It means irritation can become a teacher. In a quiet kitchen, when something spills, the mind may see itself clearly for a moment. Here is impatience. Here is expectation. Here is the wish that nothing resist me. Seen gently, even a small annoyance can loosen its grip. Fact 48. A Stoic could enjoy comfort while remembering that comfort is temporary. Stoicism was not a command to dislike warm blankets, good food, friendship, music, or rest. The danger was not enjoyment itself. The danger was dependence. A person can sit beside a fire and be grateful for its warmth, without believing life has betrayed them when the fire goes out. Seneca, who knew both luxury and moral unease, often warned that comfort should be received as something borrowed, not owned forever. This way of enjoying is lighter, does not squeeze the moment so tightly. The meal can be pleasant. The bed can be soft. The evening can be calm. And somewhere in the background, the mind remembers, this too is a visitor. Welcome it kindly. Let it leave when it must. Fact 49. Stoic discipline was meant to make people more available for duty, friendship, and service. Kenner. Sometimes discipline is imagined as a private achievement, a way to become impressive or untouchable. But Stoic discipline had a social purpose. If anger rules me, I become harder to trust. If fear rules me, I may abandon what needs care. If vanity rules me, I may use other people as mirrors. Training the mind was therefore not only for personal peace. It was for becoming a better neighbor, friend, parent, citizen, or companion. In the Stoic view, self-command creates room for service. The calmer person can listen longer. The less greedy person can share more easily. The less reactive person can protect what is fragile. Discipline, at its best, is not a wall around the self. It is a cleared path toward others. Fact 50. In daily life, Stoicism turns philosophy into repeated small acts of returning to oneself. The daily Stoic life is not made only of great crises, famous sayings, or dramatic tests of courage. Most of it is repetition. Notice the judgment. Return to what is yours. Speak fairly. Accept the weather. Do the work. Remember that another person is human. Begin again after failure. These acts may happen dozens of times in a single day, quietly enough that nobody else sees them. But over time, they form a kind of inner path. The person walking it still becomes tired, still forgets, still reacts too quickly, still needs rest. Stoicism allows for returning. That is part of its mercy. The mind wanders into fear or resentment, and then, softly, it comes back. Not once, but many times. Fact 51. Stoicism asks people to accept fate while still taking responsibility for their actions. This is one of the quiet tensions at the heart of Stoicism. The Stoics believed that events unfold within a larger order, a web of causes far beyond one person's control. And yet, they did not use this belief as an excuse to become careless. A person may not control the weather, the emperor, the body's aging, or the opinions of a crowd, but a person still has work to do inside the moment given. The Stoic does not say, "Fate will handle everything, so I need not choose." The Stoic says, "This is the material fate has placed before me. Now what kind of choice can I make with it?" Acceptance becomes not a sleep of the will, but a clearing of the mind. Fact 52. The Stoic view of fate does not remove effort. It places effort inside a larger order. To the Stoics, human effort was itself part of fate, not something outside it. A farmer cannot command rain, but still prepares the soil. The sailor cannot command the wind, but still adjusts the sail. The sick person cannot command healing, but may still seek care, rest, and patience. This kind of thinking softens the mind without making it lazy. It says, "Do your part, but do not pretend your part is the whole universe." That sentence can be restful. Many anxieties come from secretly trying to be responsible for everything. The outcome, the timing, the reaction, the future. Stoicism gives back proportion. Effort belongs to us in one way. Results belong to a wider world. We act, then release. Fact 53. The Stoics believed emotions often begin with judgments, not just events. A storm begins outside the window, but panic begins in the meaning the mind gives to the storm. A person forgets to reply, but resentment begins when the mind decides they do not care. Pain appears in the body, but despair begins when the mind says, "This will ruin everything." The Stoics did not think all emotion could be turned off like a lamp. They did think many emotions grow from judgments we may not have examined. This idea gives practice a doorway. Instead of wrestling directly with the feeling, we can ask what thought is feeding it. Is it true? Is it certain? Is it useful? In the space around those questions, the feeling may not disappear, but it may become less absolute. Fact 54. Difficult Stoic idea is that reputation belongs partly to other people's minds. Reputation feels close to us because it has our name attached to it. Praise can warm the chest. Criticism can sting for days. Yet the Stoics noticed something uncomfortable. What other people think is not entirely ours. Their judgments depend on their memories, moods, values, fears, and incomplete information. We can act with honesty. We can speak with care. We can repair harm when repair is needed. But we cannot enter another person's mind and arrange the furniture there. This does not mean reputation never matters. It means it should not become our master. In the quiet after being misunderstood, Stoicism offers a hard but freeing question. Did I act as well as I could? If so, let the echo fade. Fact 55. Stoicism teaches that death is natural, but this does not make grief simple or easy. The Stoics often reminded themselves that death belongs to nature. Leaves fall, bodies age, generations pass, and no living thing is exempt from change. But saying death is natural does not make loss painless. A person grieving does not become comforted simply because a fact is true. A wiser Stoic approach is gentler than that. It allows grief to be felt, while trying not to add the belief that love has become meaningless or that the universe has made a special exception of cruelty. In a darkened room, after a voice is gone, philosophy should speak softly. Death is part of nature. So is mourning. So is remembering. Stoicism does not remove the ache of love, tries to keep the ache from turning into despair. Fact 56. The Stoics tried to make peace with impermanence without becoming careless. Impermanence can be misunderstood in two opposite ways. One person clings more tightly because everything changes. Another person becomes indifferent because nothing lasts. The Stoic path is neither panic nor neglect. Because things are temporary, we should meet them with attention. Because they are not fully ours, we should not crush them with possession. Child grows. A season passes. A face changes with age. A city street looks different after many years. None of this means care is wasted. It means care must be awake. The Stoic does not say, "This will pass, so it does not matter." The Stoic says, "This will pass, so let me not sleep through it. Let me hold it rightly while it is here." Fact 57. Stoic freedom is inner freedom, but it does not ignore political or social realities. Epictetus taught powerfully about inner freedom, partly because he knew outer constraint. But Stoicism becomes distorted if inner freedom is used to pretend that outer conditions do not matter. Poverty, injustice, illness, violence, and oppression are real. The Stoic point is not that these things are imaginary. The point is that even under pressure, a human being may still have some relationship to judgment, choice, courage, and dignity. At the same time, justice remains a virtue. A Stoic who sees unfairness should not merely say, "My mind is free," and walk away. Inner freedom should make outer responsibility steadier, not weaker. A person less ruled by fear may be better able to speak, help, endure, and protect. Fact 58. Stoicism values reason, yet it also understands how fragile human attention can be. The Stoics placed great trust in reason, but they did not imagine that people are naturally clear all the time. If we were, philosophy would hardly be needed. Tension drifts. Anger narrows the world. Desire exaggerates its object. Fear speaks quickly and loudly. Tired mind can mistake a small problem for a permanent truth. This is why Stoic practice is repetitive. Morning preparation, evening review, reading, writing, pausing, remembering, all of these are ways of caring for attention. Reason is not a cold machine inside us. It is more like a lamp that needs tending. Some nights it burns low. Some days wind comes through the cracks. Still, with patience, it can be protected and lit again. Fact 59. The Stoics wanted harmony with nature, but nature could include sickness, aging, and loss. Living according to nature sounds peaceful when we imagine trees, stars, rivers, and the rhythm of seasons. But nature also includes fever, decay, storms, hunger, and death. The Stoics did not look only at the pleasant half of nature. They tried to accept the whole pattern. This is difficult because the human heart naturally says yes to spring, and no to winter, yes to birth, and no to farewell. Stoicism does not shame that response. It simply asks whether the mind can learn to belong to the whole world, not only the parts that please it. In the evening, when the body is tired and the day has not gone as planned, this thought may become softer. I am not outside nature. I am within it. Fact 60. Stoicism is comforting partly because it does not pretend life is always gentle. Some comfort comes from being told that everything will be easy. Stoicism offers a different kind. It says that life includes loss, conflict, uncertainty, illness, misunderstanding, and change. But it also says that the human soul can practice steadiness within these things. This honesty is why the philosophy can feel restful. There is no need to keep arguing with reality before sleep. The day may have been imperfect. The future may still be unclear. Someone may not have understood you. Some burden may still be waiting for morning. Stoicism does not wave these away. It simply sits beside them and asks for one calmer breath, one clearer judgment, one less violent thought. Sometimes that is enough to let the night become quiet. Fact 61. Stoicism influenced Roman ideas of duty, law, citizenship, and self-command. As Stoicism became part of Roman intellectual life, it found a natural home among people concerned with duty and public order. Rome valued discipline, service, law, and the ability to endure hardship without losing one's role in the larger community. Stoicism gave these values a philosophical depth. It taught that a person was not merely a private creature chasing comfort, but a rational and social being with responsibilities to others. Judge, soldier, parent, senator, or teacher might all hear something useful in that idea. The self was not meant to float alone, belonged inside a human city. To govern oneself was therefore not only private hygiene of the soul, it was a way of becoming more trustworthy in the world. Fact 62. Seneca's letters helped preserve Stoicism as intimate moral advice across centuries. Seneca's letters to Lucilius are among the reasons Stoicism still feels close to modern readers. They are not abstract treatises alone. They often sound like one person writing to another in a serious but familiar tone, speaking about time, fear, friendship, old age, wealth, illness, noise, travel, and death. A letter is a gentle form. It crosses distance. It arrives in someone's hands. It can be read at a desk, beside a window, or late at night when the house is quiet. Seneca's letters helped Stoicism survive because they made philosophy feel conversational. They did not remove difficulty from life. They offered a way to sit with difficulty and examine it slowly, as if in the company of a careful friend. Fact 63. Epictetus influenced later readers because his teaching felt direct, plain, and practical. Epictetus did not write a polished book for publication in the way some philosophers did. His student, Arrian, recorded his teachings, preserving the sharp, spoken quality of his voice. Epictetus often sounds like a teacher who wants to wake the student from confusion without wasting words. He asks, what is yours, what is not yours, what you are afraid of, what you have mistaken for freedom. His style can be stern, but beneath it is a wish to liberate the mind from false ownership. In a small classroom, one can imagine students listening while he turns them again and again toward the same discipline. Do not hand your peace to things outside your moral purpose. It is a hard teaching, but a clean one. Fact 64. Marcus Aurelius became one of the most widely read Stoic figures because his writing feels private and human. Many readers come to Stoicism through Marcus Aurelius because Meditations does not feel like a lecture from an emperor. It feels like a person reminding himself how to remain decent while tired. He repeats himself, corrects himself, encourages himself, and sometimes sounds weary of human pettiness, including his own. That is part of the book's power. It does not present philosophy as a finished crown placed on the head. It presents philosophy as daily return. The reader sees not only ideas, but effort. In a tent, a palace room, or a cold military camp, Marcus writes as if trying to keep the soul aligned under pressure. His privacy became, strangely, a source of companionship for later centuries. Fact 65. Early Christian thinkers sometimes found Stoic ethics useful, even while disagreeing with Stoic theology. Stoicism did not simply vanish when the ancient world changed. Some of its moral, language, and practices continued to influence later religious and philosophical traditions. Early Christian writers could appreciate Stoic themes such as self-control, endurance, moral seriousness, and the examination of passions. At the same time, they often disagreed with Stoic ideas about God, fate, the soul, or the nature of salvation. This mixture is important. Influence does not mean sameness. Thought can travel, be revised, softened, opposed, and absorbed in new ways. Stoicism's afterlife was not a straight road. It moved like a quiet stream through many landscapes, sometimes visible, sometimes underground, carrying certain questions forward. How should we suffer? How should we act? And what is the good of the soul? Fact 66. Renaissance humanists rediscovered Stoic texts as guides for public life and private endurance. During the Renaissance, as ancient texts were studied with renewed energy, Stoic writers became important companions for scholars, statesmen, and moral thinkers. Their works offered a language for dignity in unstable times. Europe, like the ancient world, knew political conflict, disease, ambition, exile, and religious tension. Stoicism spoke to people who had to live among uncertainty without losing themselves completely. A humanist at a wooden desk, surrounded by manuscripts, might find in Seneca or Epictetus not an escape from history, but a way to remain inwardly ordered while history moved around him. The old Roman sentences became usable again. They crossed the centuries because the human problems had not changed as much as the clothing, buildings, and languages around them. Fact 67. Stoicism influenced ideas of dignity, self-rule, and moral independence in later philosophy. One of Stoicism's lasting contributions is the idea that a person's deepest dignity does not depend entirely on rank, wealth, beauty, health, or public applause. This thought reappears in many later conversations about moral independence. The Stoics did not make all people equal in the modern political sense, and their world was marked by many inequalities. But their philosophy contained a powerful seed. What matters most in a human being is not external position, but rational and moral capacity. That seed could grow in different soils. It helped later readers think about conscience, freedom, and self-command. The image is quiet but strong. A person standing inwardly upright, even when the world measures them by the wrong things. Fact 68. Modern psychology has sometimes found Stoic techniques similar to cognitive reframing. Some modern forms of therapy, especially cognitive approaches, share a family resemblance with Stoic practice. The similarity lies in examining the thoughts and judgments that shape emotional suffering. A situation happens, the mind interprets it, and the interpretation affects the feeling. Stoics noticed this long ago, though they placed it inside a larger moral and cosmic philosophy. Modern psychology does not simply repeat ancient Stoicism, and Stoicism is not the same as therapy. Still, the overlap helps explain why many people find Stoic exercises practical. To ask, what judgment am I adding, can soften a moment of fear or anger. It gives the mind something gentle to do, not to deny pain, but to look more carefully at the story pain is carrying. Fact 69. Stoicism became popular again because many people feel surrounded by noise, uncertainty, and pressure. In recent years, Stoicism has returned to public attention through books, podcasts, articles, and daily quotations. Some of this popularity simplifies the philosophy too much, but the longing underneath is understandable. People feel pulled by constant information, changing work, social comparison, political anxiety, personal ambition, and private loneliness. Stoicism offers a small, clear space inside that noise. It says, begin with what is yours. Examine the judgment. Remember that praise and blame are unstable. Practice courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. These are old instructions, but the nervous system of a modern person can still recognize their usefulness. The world has changed greatly. The mind still needs rest from trying to hold everything at once. Fact 70. Its long influence comes from a simple promise. The mind can be trained even when life cannot be arranged. This may be why Stoicism keeps returning in different ages. Very few people can arrange life exactly as they wish. Plans bend. Bodies tire. People misunderstand. Money changes. Weather interrupts. History moves. Even the most careful person lives among forces beyond command. Stoicism does not promise to remove those forces. It promises that the mind can practice a different relationship with them. Not perfect control, not permanent serenity. Training, to might, returning, remembering, choosing again. That is a modest promise, but also a deep one. It means no day is entirely wasted if one clear judgment is recovered. It means no night is completely lost if the soul can loosen its grip and breathe. Fact 71. Stoicism and Epicureanism both sought peace, but they understood the path differently. In the ancient world, Stoics and Epicureans were often compared because both schools asked how human beings might live with less fear. They were not simply enemies, though they disagreed deeply. Epicureans sought a quiet life through modest pleasure, friendship, and freedom from unnecessary desire. Stoics sought peace through virtue, reason, and accepting what does not belong to us. You can imagine two gardens in the same evening light. In one, people speak softly about simple pleasure and the absence of disturbance. In another, people prepare the mind for duty, loss, and moral choice. Both are trying to calm the human heart. They simply trust different roads. The comparison helps us see Stoicism more clearly. Its peace is not mainly comfort, but character. Fact 72. Stoicism valued virtue above pleasure, while Epicureanism valued simple, stable pleasure above restless desire. The difference between Stoics and Epicureans is often simplified too much. Epicurus did not teach wild luxury. He taught that the best pleasure was often simple: bread, water, friendship, safety, and a mind free from terror. Clever. The Stoics could respect simplicity, but they placed virtue even higher than peaceful feeling. For them, a pleasant life without justice would not be truly good. Calm life without courage would still be incomplete. This matters because Stoicism does not make comfort the final aim. It asks what kind of person is enjoying the comfort. Quiet evening can be lovely. A warm room can be welcome. But if peace depends only on conditions, it trembles when conditions change. Stoic peace tries to rest somewhere deeper. Fact 73. Stoicism and Cynicism both prized independence, but Stoicism remained more connected to civic duty. The Cynics influenced the Stoics strongly, especially through their rejection of vanity, luxury, and social pretense. A cynic might live with almost nothing, challenge public manners, and expose how many human desires are artificial. The Stoics admired this freedom, but they usually chose a more social path. They did not think independence required abandoning the city, the family, or public responsibility. Stoic could wear ordinary clothing, hold office, raise children, manage property, and still practice detachment. The difference is subtle but important. Cynicism often stands outside society, pointing at its foolishness. Stoicism tries to remain within society while not being owned by it. One is like a rough voice in the street. The other is like a steady hand at the table. Fact 74. Stoicism and Buddhism share some interest in attachment, but they come from different worlds and assumptions. People often compare Stoicism with Buddhism because both speak about desire, suffering, impermanence, and the training of the mind. The comparison can be useful if it stays careful. Stoics warned against clinging to externals as if they were fully ours. Buddhists, in many traditions, analyze craving and attachment as sources of suffering in a much wider spiritual framework. But the two traditions come from different cultures, languages, practices, and views of the self. Stoicism is rooted in Greek and Roman ideas of reason, virtue, nature, and cosmic order. Buddhism has its own paths of meditation, ethics, insight, and liberation. Placing them side by side can be calming, but they should not be melted into one vague teaching. Each deserves its own quiet room. Fact 75. Stoicism and Taoism can both sound calm, but Stoicism emphasizes reason, while Taoism emphasizes effortless alignment. First glance, Stoicism and Taoism may seem to meet in their acceptance of reality. Both can teach a person to stop struggling against the nature of things, but their tones are different. Stoicism often speaks in the language of reason, discipline, judgment, and moral duty. Taoism, especially in the Tao Te Ching, often speaks of water, softness, non-forcing, and moving with the Tao. One might imagine a Stoic carefully examining an impression before choosing the right action. One might imagine a Taoist watching a stream move around stones without argument. Both images can rest the mind, but they are not identical. Stoicism asks us to align with nature through reasoned virtue. Taoism often invites a more effortless harmony with the way. Fact 76. Stoicism differs from modern self-help because it places ethics above personal success. Modern readers sometimes use Stoicism to become more disciplined, focused, productive, or resilient. There is nothing wrong with discipline when it serves a good life. But ancient Stoicism was not mainly about winning, gaining status, or becoming impressive. It was about becoming wise, courageous, just, and temperate. This difference changes everything. A person might use self-control to chase applause. A Stoic would ask whether applause is worth chasing. A person might endure hardship to become powerful. It would ask whether power is being used justly. In a quiet office late at night, the question is not only, did I achieve more? It is, did I become better? Stoicism can support effort, but it does not bow down before success. Fact 77. Stoicism differs from fatalism because it still asks for active, careful, honorable choices. Fatalism often sounds like this: whatever will happen, so nothing matters. Stoicism is different. It agrees that much lies beyond our control, but it does not conclude that choice is meaningless. Instead, it makes choice more important. If the outcome is uncertain, then the quality of our action becomes the part we must tend. The archer draws the bow, aims with care, and releases. The arrow may be moved by wind, distance, or accident. Still, the archer's work was not meaningless. It belonged to the archer. Stoicism lives in that distinction. We do not command the whole field. Command, imperfectly but truly, the way we step into it. Fate may shape the road. Character still shapes the walk. Fact 78. Stoicism differs from optimism because it does not require expecting things to turn out well. Optimism can be helpful, but Stoicism does not depend on the belief that events will improve in the way we hope. The Stoic does not have to say, everything will be fine. Sometimes things will not be fine. Plans fail. People leave. Illness stays longer than expected. The door remains closed. Stoic steadiness comes from another place. It says that even if the outcome is uncertain, wisdom is still possible. Even if the day is difficult, patience is still possible. Even if the future does not obey our wishes, the next right action may still be found. This is not cheerful in an easy way. It is stronger than cheerfulness. It lets the mind rest without forcing the world to promise anything. Fact 79. Stoicism differs from cynicism in the modern sense because it still believes in duty, goodness, and human community. The word cynical today often means distrustful, bitter, or convinced that people are only selfish. Stoicism is not that. Keller. The Stoics were realistic about human weakness, but they did not turn that realism into contempt. Marcus Aurelius expected to meet difficult people. Yet he also reminded himself that human beings are made for cooperation. Epictetus warned against false values, but he still cared about moral progress. Seneca wrote about corruption and vanity, but also friendship, mercy, and the shared condition of human life. Stoicism sees confusion without giving up on goodness. It may lower expectations in one sense, so we are less shocked by flaws, but it raises responsibility in another. We must not become what disappoints us. Fact 80. Comparing Stoicism with other traditions shows how many paths have tried to soften fear without denying reality. Stoicism is only one answer to old human questions. How should we live when things change? How should we meet pain, desire, death, anger, and uncertainty? Other traditions answer differently, with different images, practices, and hopes. Epicureans speak of simple pleasure. Cynics speak of radical freedom. Buddhists speak of attachment and liberation. Taoists speak of the way and non-forcing. Stoics speak of virtue, reason, nature, and what belongs to us. Hearing these voices together can make the mind feel less alone. Across centuries and continents, human beings have sat under lamps, beside roads, in gardens, temples, porches, and rooms, asking how to suffer less blindly. Stoicism is one quiet path among them, steady enough to walk for a while. Fact 81. The Stoics used the image of a dog tied to a cart to explain willing and unwilling acceptance of fate. One ancient Stoic image compares a person to a dog tied to a moving cart. If the dog runs along willingly, it is still tied to the cart, but it moves with less suffering. If the dog resists, it is dragged. The image can sound harsh at first, yet its meaning is simple. Some parts of life move whether we consent or not. Time, aging, weather, other people's choices, the arrival of change. Stoicism asks whether we can meet what cannot be avoided with less inner tearing. This does not mean loving every event. It means noticing when resistance has become useless pain. The cart is moving. The question is whether the soul must be dragged. Fact 82. Chrysippus was so important that later people said there would be no Stoa without him. Chrysippus, the third head of the Stoic school, was remembered as an astonishingly productive thinker. Later ancient writers credited him with defending and organizing Stoicism so thoroughly that a saying arose: if there had been no Chrysippus, there would have been no Stoa. Most of his writings are lost, which gives his influence a ghostly feeling. He is everywhere in the structure, but rarely present in his own full voice. You can imagine shelves once filled with arguments about logic, fate, emotion, and nature, now reduced to fragments carried inside other books. Stoicism, as we know it, is partly a house whose architect left few complete drawings. Still, the shape of his work remains in the walls. Fact 83. Stoic logic was once considered one of the school's great achievements, though modern readers often skip it. Many modern readers come to Stoicism for calm, resilience, or moral guidance, and they move quickly towards Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. But early Stoicism placed great importance on logic. The Stoics studied propositions, arguments, language, and the way false reasoning leads the mind astray. This was not a dry hobby for them. If a person reasons badly, they may fear what is not dangerous, desire what is not good, or believe an insult has harmed the soul more than it has. Logic protected ethics. It helped the mind test impressions before surrendering to them. In quieter terms, clear thinking was a form of care. Confused mind can make a small trouble much heavier than it needs to be. Fact 84. The Stoics believed the universe was ordered by logos, a rational principle running through nature. The Greek word logos can mean reason, account, word, or ordering principle, depending on context. For the Stoics, logos named the rational structure of the cosmos, the deep order by which nature unfolds. This idea gave Stoicism its sense that human reason is not a lonely accident, but part of a larger rational world. To live wisely was to align the small reasoning mind with the greater order of things. This can be difficult for modern readers, who may not share the same ancient cosmology. Still, the emotional meaning can be understood. The Stoic looked at the stars, seasons, growth, decay, birth, and death, and tried to say, I am not separate from this order. I belong to it. Fact 85. Stoic physics included ideas about fire, breath, matter, and cosmic cycles. Ancient Stoicism was not only a moral philosophy, it also had a physical picture of the universe. The Stoics believed that everything was material in some sense, shaped and animated by a divine rational fire or breath, often called pneuma. They also believed in great cosmic cycles, in which the universe might be periodically renewed through fire. These ideas belong to an ancient scientific and religious imagination, not to modern physics, but they mattered to Stoic ethics. The Stoics wanted human life to fit within their understanding of nature as living, ordered, and interconnected. A person was not a detached mind floating above the world. A person was woven into the same fabric as bodies, stars, seasons, and breath. To live well was to know oneself as part of the whole. Fact 86. Key. The Stoics practiced remembering that every person is part of a larger human city. Stoics helped develop the idea of cosmopolitanism, the thought that a person belongs not only to one household, tribe, or city, but to a wider community of humankind. This did not erase local duties. It widened them. A stranger was not merely a stranger. At some level, they shared reason, vulnerability, mortality, and the need for justice. Imagine standing in a busy port city hearing different languages, seeing different clothing, watching ships arrive from places you may never visit. Stoicism asks the mind to draw a larger circle around belonging. Not everyone will be close to us. Not everyone can be loved in the same intimate way. That everyone can be recognized as part of the human city. Fact 87. Hierocles described moral growth as drawing wider circles of concern around the self. The Stoic philosopher Hierocles used an image that remains quietly beautiful. He pictured human concern in circles. At the center is the self. Around that are family, friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, and eventually all humanity. Moral growth means drawing the outer circles inward, treating those farther away with more of the care we naturally give to those near us. This is not easy. The heart has limits, and life gives us only so much time and strength. But the image is useful because it gives kindness a direction. The person need not feel equal intimacy with everyone. Still, they can practice widening concern. The self remains, but it is no longer a locked room. It becomes a doorway. Fact 88. Many Stoic writings are lost, so the tradition we know is only part of what once existed. When we speak about Stoicism today, we often rely on a small surviving portion of a much larger tradition. Works by early Stoics such as Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus are mostly gone. We know them through quotations, summaries, criticisms, and fragments preserved by later writers. This gives Stoicism a slightly moonlit quality. We see enough to walk by, but not the full landscape. Some arguments are missing. Some voices are faint. Some debates are known only by their shadows. The loss invites humility. We should not imagine that the whole ancient school is contained in a few popular quotations. What remains is precious, but partial. Like many old things, Stoicism reaches us through both memory and absence. Fact 89. Marcus Aurelius probably never intended his private notes to become a famous book. The work now called Meditations was likely not written for publication. Its original Greek title is often rendered as something like "to himself," which captures its private nature. Marcus was not trying to create a polished self-help classic for future readers. He was reminding himself how to live. That is why the book repeats themes and sometimes feels raw, severe, tender, or tired. It is a record of practice rather than performance. Picture a ruler with enormous duties writing not for applause, but to steady the mind before another day. The privacy of the text makes its later fame strangely moving. Words meant for one weary soul became useful to many. Private exercise became a public lamp. Fact 90. The fragmentary nature of Stoicism makes it feel almost like a set of quiet lamps left burning across time. Stoicism does not come down to us as one complete, perfect library. It comes as letters, notes, remembered lectures, quotations, fragments, reports, and surviving books. Some lamps are bright, like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Others are dimmer, like Zeno, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, and Hierocles, whose full voices are harder to hear. Yet together, they still give light. The gaps may even slow us down in a useful way. We cannot possess the whole tradition completely. We can only sit with what remains, listen carefully, and let the old questions breathe. How should I live? What is mine? What can be released? As night deepens, even fragments can be enough. Fact 91. Stoicism remains powerful because it begins with ordinary human vulnerability. Stoicism does not begin with a perfect sage sitting above the world, untouched by sorrow. It begins much closer to us than that. It begins with a person who is afraid of losing what they love, the person who wants approval, a person who becomes angry too quickly, the person who cannot control the future, but still has to wake up and live inside it. This is why the philosophy continues to feel useful. It knows the human being is exposed. The body can be hurt. Plans can fail. People can leave. Time can take what seemed secure. Stoicism does not laugh at this vulnerability. It sits beside it and asks whether, even here, something steady can be practiced. Fact 92. It does not promise control over the world, only a better relationship with what happens. Many systems of thought become attractive because they seem to promise mastery. Stoicism is quieter than that. It does not say the world will finally obey us if we think correctly. It does not say pain will vanish, other people will become easy, or fortune will become fair. Instead, it offers a different kind of hope, that our relationship with events can change. The same delay may become less enraging. The same criticism may become less poisonous. The same uncertainty may become less like a storm inside the chest. A person still lives in a changing world, but not every change has to throw the soul across the room. The event arrives. The mind breathes. The response becomes possible. Fact 93. Stoicism gives language to the moment between stimulus and response. Much of life happens in a small, hidden space. Something occurs, and then we answer. A sound wakes us. A person disagrees. A memory returns. The plan breaks. Before the reply, before the gesture, before the old habit takes over, there is often a tiny opening. Stoicism lives there. It says, look at the impression. Ask what it is claiming. Ask whether the claim is true. Ask what kind of person you want to be as you answer. This may seem too small to matter, but character is often built in such brief spaces. A life can turn gently, not only through grand decisions, but through many quiet pauses. One breath before anger. One thought before fear. One softer word before sleep. Fact 94. Its deepest comfort may be the idea that dignity can survive changing circumstances. The Stoics returned again and again to the thought that external conditions do not fully define the worth of a human being. Wealth may change. Beauty may fade. Health may weaken. Reputation may rise and fall like weather over a city. But dignity, for the Stoics, belongs more deeply to the use of reason, the quality of choice, and the care given to virtue. This is not an easy teaching, especially when life is painful, but it can be quietly strengthening. A person who has lost status is still a person. A person who is ill is still capable of courage. A person who has been misunderstood is still able to act with justice. Something inward can remain upright, even when the outer room has changed. Fact 95. The Stoic life is not a life without sorrow, but a life with a place to stand inside sorrow. Some people turn away from Stoicism because they think it will ask them not to grieve. But a wiser reading is gentler. Stoicism does not need sorrow to disappear before dignity can return. It asks whether sorrow can be held without becoming hatred, whether fear can be felt without becoming surrender, whether loss can be mourned without making all goodness seem false. A person standing beside a grave or sitting alone after bad news does not need clever phrases. They need steadiness that does not insult the heart. Stoicism offers a place to stand, not a way to float above being human. The tears may come, the hands may tremble, and still, the soul may not be abandoned. Fact 96. Stoicism gently asks what is truly ours at the end of the day. Night. Many things that seemed urgent begin to loosen. The voices of the day grow quieter. Praise does not sound as loud. Criticism loses some of its sharpness. The unfinished tasks remain, but they no longer fill the whole sky. In that softer hour, the Stoic question can be heard more clearly. What was truly mine today? Not every result, not every opinion, not every accident of timing. Perhaps what was mine was the effort to speak honestly, the attempt to be fair, the decision not to answer cruelty with cruelty, the patience to begin again after failing. These are small possessions, but they are real ones. At the end of the day, they may be enough to carry into sleep. Fact 97. It invites the listener to set down reputation, outcome, and regret, at least for the night. Stoicism is serious, but it can also be merciful. Knows the mind keeps holding things long after holding has stopped helping. Conversation is replayed. A mistake is polished with worry. An imagined future is rehearsed again and again, as if anxiety could make it safer. The Stoic does not say these thoughts are foolish. It simply asks whether they belong in our hands right now. Reputation lives partly in other minds. Outcomes live partly in the world beyond us. Regret may teach, but it should not be allowed to become a room with no door. For tonight, some things can be placed gently on the ground, not solved, not denied, just set down long enough for the body to rest. Fact 98. Its quietest lesson is that peace may begin with seeing things as they are. Before peace becomes a feeling, it may need to become honesty. This happened. This did not happen. This is mine to do. This is not mine to command. This person is human. This body is tired. This day is finished. The Stoics trusted this kind of clear seeing. Not harsh seeing, not hopeless seeing, but seeing without adding more confusion than the moment requires. Candle does not change the shape of a room by arguing with it. It simply lights what is there. Stoic attention works in a similar way. Lets the mind stop fighting shadows it has made for itself. And when things are seen more simply, they may also be carried more lightly into the dark. Fact 99. Heed. As sleep approaches, Stoicism becomes less like an argument and more like a slow exhale. In the beginning, Stoicism may sound like a set of ideas: virtue, nature, control, fate, judgment, reason. But near sleep, the ideas soften. They no longer need to be solved or memorized. They become a rhythm. Let go of what is not yours. Return to the next honest breath. Be kind where you can. Accept the weather of the world. Do not let every passing impression become your ruler. These thoughts do not have to be held tightly. They can pass through the mind like wind moving across a quiet porch. The old philosophers can recede into the background. The room can become simple again. The body can be heavy. The night can continue. Fact 100. The final Stoic fact is simple. We cannot hold everything, but we can meet this moment with care. After all the names, stories, doctrines, fragments, and practices, Stoicism returns to something very small. This moment, this breath, this thought, this choice. No one can hold the whole future. No one can repair the whole past before sleeping. No one can make every person understand, every outcome settle, every fear become silent at once. But perhaps we can meet this moment with a little more care. We can loosen the hand around what is not ours. We can let the body rest. We can allow the mind to stop working so hard. In that small release, Stoicism becomes not a command, but a permission. Enough has been carried for now. And now, as the final idea settles, there is nothing more you need to do. Let the thoughts grow softer. Let the room be enough. Thank you for resting with the Sleep Library. Sleep well and good night.